Welcome to the NGP Trials and Tribulations series. I'm Taylor St. Jacques.
And I'm Nora Nauss.
So Nora, I've gotten to know you over the past few months, riding at the barn with you and seeing you every single day, all day long. I've heard about a little bit of your success with the young horses, and it's been really fun to watch you develop them, behind the scenes and not just in the ring. Tell me a little bit about your journey, how you got here. I don't know you prior to this, so.
Yeah, I started riding when I was, I think 8, maybe 7 years old. My best friend, I met her when I was a year old. Her sisters were taking riding lessons and we did everything together, so I decided to go and take a lesson with her. And funnily enough, I stuck with it, and her sisters did not. And then from there, I took probably weekly or 2 times a week lessons. I moved around a little bit when I was younger, but then I started to really get into it when I leased my first horse in 2019. And then I kind of learned the jumpers from there, and then when it was time to move up, finally convinced my dad to get a horse of our own. And then I just really found a love for the jumpers, and in October of 2022, I moved to Andrew down to Team Wells, and it's been amazing, and I kind of found my love for the young horses through Andrew and an opportunity to ride his homebred when he was at the end of his 4-year-old year, and he'll be 7 now, so I've really just enjoyed working with the young horses here. So
That's awesome. It's been a lot of fun to watch, for sure.
Thank you. So I grew up riding in Minnesota, and I went to kind of the more Midwest local shows, and I rode a lot of lesson horses, but the horses I had myself were mainly jumpers, so I didn't really do much of the hunters and equitation, but I'm wondering, how was that kind of path for you and doing more of that during your junior career?
Yeah, so I started just in the hunters. I actually didn't ride my first jumper until I was, I think, 15 years old. The hunters taught me discipline for sure, and, having to go and ride a smooth round start to finish. And when I started doing the equitation, it was definitely a big learning curve for me, learning track riding and the importance of position. I honestly think that really translated for me personally, at least, the jumpers, going into the jumper ring and kind of learning that discipline now. In the equitation, I got a chance to learn the track riding and the importance of position and, the shape of the horse and the jump you get out of the horse without the pressure of the big jumps. And I feel that it definitely applied a lot to when I went in the jumper ring. Okay, you throw style out the window sometimes. That was a hard lesson for me to learn when I stopped doing the equitation. Hey, you don't have to look pretty 24/7. Just get it done and win. But I am very grateful that I did the equitation and learned all those things before I went into the jumpers, because when I went into the jumpers, I kind of applied all of that, and my learning process through the jumpers came from basics instead of kind of trial and error, which, depending on the person, it might be a better situation for one person versus another. I think I could have learned through trial and error. That's definitely how I learned best as a rider, but I am very grateful for my confidence, for sure, that I got to kind of learn it through the equitation and then apply it to the jumpers. It's kind of the American system, as people call it. You don't really learn that anywhere else in the world. So it's definitely very different, because for sure when European horses come over, they aren't equitation broke, and I always question how they get them around courses. You would be able to just hop on and make it go around perfectly, because you grew up with, the lesson horses or the more local horses that weren't perfectly equitation broke. And, the young horses aren't perfectly broke. So it was definitely, for me as a rider, it's a little tough when horses come over for me. I'm I need a few months to teach them how I ride. But I think that differs per person. So definitely your experience versus mine, very different, but we all have the same goals, and I think it's cool that you can see two very different perspectives on it, and still be able to achieve the same goals.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's so cool too. Like you're saying, different styles of horses, after growing up doing the equitation. Because I honestly, like, if I can really simplify things and, like, I just get on a horse, I don't really know what it's done, I don't know how it likes to go, and I just I can roll with it that way, where, like, I actually kind of struggle on the more conventional ones. Like, if you asked me to get on an equitation horse, I would not make it look as pretty as you can, so.
I appreciate those, like, the differences in our, like, upbringings, and, it's kind of funny that, like, the good riders struggle with simple horses sometimes and the easier horses, and vice versa. I'll get on a horse and be like, I can't ride one side of this thing, and then a 10-year-old child hops on and runs around the children's jumpers, and I can't get it to jump a clear round at home. I just think that's funny, and that's also something I've learned as a professional when it comes to selling horses, is something that I find super easy may not be easy for someone else, and something that I find to be very difficult to ride, or not as enjoyable as some other horses some other people think the world of and think it's like the greatest thing since sliced bread. So that's kind of the diversity of this sport that is special, that you don't really have in really any other sport in the world, is working with these horses and different people, and there's a lot of diversity in it.
Yeah. It's very cool, all the preferences and everything.
For sure.
And like a cavaletti lesson can be harder than a Grand Prix sometimes.
I've definitely learned that through Andrew.
Oh yeah. Can relate to that one.
You want to feel like you know nothing? Come take a cavaletti lesson with Andrew.
Yeah, he's got you.
So since you do more of the like young horses, I say my young horses and they're not young at all, but inexperienced. So I don't naturally have an eye for a young horse of like what to look for at that age, or the feeling that it should have, to kind of figure out what they're going to be when they get older. Like, what are some things that you look for in the young horses, or you feel when you're on them, to kind of differentiate one that's maybe special, or, just an average horse?
Yeah, I think, I'm of course still learning all of it. It's still, I've only started doing the young horses in the past couple years, so it's definitely a learning curve for me. But I would say my biggest thing is definitely brain. How do they respond to the questions you ask them? Are they in a new environment? How are they reacting to that? Are they more of a nervous type, or are they brave and they just go out and act like they've been there their whole life? How do they respond to like a spooky jump, And I think with really young horses too, it's not necessarily a bad thing if they aren't just like bullheaded brave, If they take a look at a spooky fence, they might be more of a careful type, and they just have to learn it, and you have to take it a little slow. But I don't think a big reaction to something spooky is necessarily a bad thing. I think the way that they come back from asking questions like that is also a really good telltale sign of how the horse will be when it's older. I would say another thing that I would like to look for is, how they find the contact and the way they like to carry themselves. You can kind of see a bit of how a horse will carry itself as a made horse. If they like to find volume in everything they do, and you might have to press them out and have them learn how to carry their stride forward, or if it's more of a big, lankier type and they need to learn how to compress. I think just knowing those sides of the horse, then you can kind of know where to go working with it after that.
That's so neat. It's funny that you talk about the, one being a little peaky at some spookier fences when they're younger being a good thing. Growing up in the hunters and the ponies, like if they flickered an ear at something, like ixnay, nope, nobody wants it, it's spooky, no, like, bad pony. But that makes so much sense when you say that, because, especially with the jumpers, obviously it's different disciplines looking for different things, but one that pays attention to the fences and notices something being a little different and a little spookier, like, it's a horse that pays attention, that wants to do well and doesn't want to make a mistake. Or even not even about a mistake, but, they're paying attention. The horses that kind of don't pay attention usually, I've learned end up being the ones that, are kind of four falters and, they're good, brave horses, but, they're not your winners. So that's great that you put that into perspective, and you can appreciate that, for me, would never think that off the top of my head if I get on a horse and it spooks at a jump. I'd be like, a little hesitation, whereas you would be like, I like that, obviously in the right way, but that's a good perspective on that for sure.
I think when they've got a little bit of fight in them, it's not a bad thing for sure.
No.
And, they might come around, hit the lights the first time they jump something spooky, and maybe the next time they come and they've chilled out a little bit, and if they make a mistake at it, then you just see how they react to it the next time. And I think it's a really good way to get to know how the horse's brain works too.
For sure.
So you're a couple years ahead of me in becoming a professional. Can you tell me about how things were for you, what you expected and what you didn't expect?
For sure. It was definitely a big learning curve. I think growing up, being a working student basically my whole life definitely helped set me up for success from the start. I wasn't kind of learning how to run a whole barn and manage people and, manage the horses, kind of just starting out. That definitely helped and made my transition a little easier, but for sure it was a totally different world. People respect you in a different manner. I'm not, a kid to these people anymore where they're like, you can help me sell my horse, Now I'm a professional and they speak to me in, professional ways. And it was a little bit everybody was kind of intimidating to me at first, because it wasn't as, not in a bad way, but it wasn't as, peppy, hey, because, they weren't looking at me as a kid anymore. I was looked at as a fellow professional. So that part definitely, it took me a minute to get used to, but I learned to appreciate the respect that I gained from, other top riders. And it was pretty cool. I think one of my first my first WEF challenge that I ever did, I was walking the course and there was a line right away from the gate that was kind of set on the half stride. And as we were all walking, everyone was coming up with different plans of what they were going to do. And it was a short line. I think it was 3 or 4 strides. So some people were going to go for 3 in the flat 3, that had a bigger strided horse. And some people were like, I think I need to do 4. And me, who, I'm just getting into the FEI, and I'm like, I have absolutely no idea what to do. I'm just really thankful I don't go first. It's probably something that this person has no idea. They even made an impact on me, but Martin Fuchs was walking the course, and I was kind of standing there, and I re-walked it 3 or 4 times, trying to think in my head what would be the best plan and approach for me and my horse. And he walked up and just talked through it with me like I was, someone that he had known forever. And I was mind blown that this man was talking to me, let alone asking my opinion. And that was a really cool moment for me. And, I try to be that person for the younger generation as well. And I think that's a really cool aspect of coming into, the higher ranks is everyone's really keen to help each other. And kind of how that translates to the business side of it is, I don't do a ton of training and clients. I do more of the, producing the horses, selling the horses. And, if you have a good horse, if someone likes your horse, they are more than happy to tell someone else about it. And, I think it's really important to make friends with everyone in this industry. It's a small world, and, being honest and upfront about horses, deals, everything really, and being a true honest person has definitely helped me, I feel like, become more respected, and looked at in a more professional, mature way. That's definitely advice that I would give to other people, and I wish there'd be a little bit more of in this industry, is the honesty and the truthfulness, with everything. It's not even just about the horses. It's, everything, what's going on behind the scenes, or, the program or the management, kind of the openness. But I found that the good people and the successful people, that's kind of what they're doing. And, I had to kind of, through the years, figure out, do I want to try to build my model around someone that I think is super successful, or do I want to build my business model how I want to? And I'm glad that I've kind of built it how I wanted to, because I've been able to take in things that I've either been a part of or seen through other people, and kind of take a tool from everyone's toolbox and put it into my own, instead of just trying to mimic someone else's toolbox. So that's definitely another piece of advice that I definitely would give is, shape your business to you. Everybody's unique, and that's what makes people stand out and be different from others, is be true to yourself, and do it the way that you feel is best. I don't worry about what other people are doing or how they're running their business, because you never know what's happening behind closed doors. Everybody likes to make things seem like everything's perfect here, but once you get to know them a little more, or you get into that awkward, deep conversation when they're having a bad day, and you learn that it's really not all like sunshine and rainbows over there. And that's kind of in life as well. You never judge a book by its cover. But yeah, definitely be true to you and be who you are. And I feel like everybody finds success in their own way. It's just about believing in yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really cool too, like what you said about Martin Fuchs coming and talking to you, like the community with horses. I was mind blown when I first came to WEF, and there's all these riders here. And one thing that kind of comes to mind for me was I did the Horse Mastership Training Series clinic at the beginning of 2024. And I remember Laura Kraut came up to my mom and was like, "Nora rode so well." And I was like, "Oh my God, Laura Kraut knows who I am." Like, I was like fangirling still. And I think it's so cool, the community that gets brought together through horses, and when we can connect with each other, and we don't always have to be each other's competition. We can help each other out. But I'm wondering, how did you kind of go about trusting yourself when you became a professional instead of trying to mimic someone else's program?
So I think it took a little bit of finding the right people to surround myself with. I tried to at first kind of answer to someone, but have my own business, and kind of just do what they say, and kind of start modeling my business around what they were asking me to do and how they wanted me to, show this horse, prepare this horse, how I speak about it to other people. And it took a little bit of people kind of backing away from their model for me to say, wait a second, like, this is not how I actually want to approach this. Like, the way I want to represent this horse is, a little bit different than the way this person wants me to represent the horse. I think it's this versus this. And it took me kind of standing up to them and believing in myself that I was doing the right thing at the end of the day, even if it meant, maybe we don't work together anymore. And it's not the end of the world if two people don't see eye to eye on something. It just opens the doors for new opportunity. And it definitely did for me. I kind of took a step away, figured out myself, like, how do I want to, like, what's my stance in this industry, and who am I, and how do I want to represent myself? And, surrounding myself with people that I see eye to eye with, and we work as a team and not kind of me versus you. I think the teamwork aspect is definitely super important. And it kind of took that for me to really open my eyes and take a step back and figure out, how do I want to go about this, and who do I want to be? And I'm grateful for, the hard times that led to better times, and, better opportunity for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know, like Andrew said to me before, and I could not agree more, that there are so many ways to do horses and so many ways to do them well. So I think just like surrounding yourself with people who see similarly to you is definitely a key thing to being successful.
For sure. And, I don't want people to take that and be like, we disagreed on something with this one horse once. So, maybe that's not the person for me to work with, because you never know, when you bounce ideas off of each other. If someone sees something a little bit different, or, hey, I had a horse very similar to this once, and, we did this to, work on this issue or this little burp. And you never know, like, what you're going to learn. Like, I think it has to do more with who you see eye to eye with on, like, ethics and all of that.
For sure.
And not necessarily, the program, so to say. And I think, you'll never know everything in this industry. There's always something to learn. And, even McLean Ward and, those people at the top, like, they can always learn something from somebody else. And, I think that's very important to also remember, is you don't know everything, and to always be open-minded, and, don't be afraid to take a tool from someone's toolbox. That was something I learned when I was younger and did a lot of clinics of, okay, I know you might not agree with everything this person is going to tell you to do, but take the things that you do like and, add them to your toolbox. And, there's definitely something to learn, whether it's in a positive way or, hey, we tried this and it really didn't go well. Let's make sure to never try something like that again. There's always so much to learn, whether it's a positive or a negative thing. And, the negative things end up being a positive thing, and being able to understand that and being a glass half full kind of mentality will definitely help you.
Yeah, that's awesome. To finish with the tradition of the series, what was the greatest moment of your career, the hardest moment, and what did you learn from both of them?
I think I'll start with the hardest moment. Was probably my second medal finals, 2016. I came back, ended up testing in the top 4, and had a really, really tragic test. Everything that could have gone wrong pretty much went wrong. And that was definitely a low part of my career, not because I didn't do well on a day, but, there was a lot of expectation for me to do well, and I put a lot of pressure on myself. And in the equitation with the medal finals, there was 2 finals the next 2 weeks that I had to rebound from. So definitely having to live that in the moment, forget about it, and, move on with the next things coming up and be able to build from that. That was definitely a hard part of my career, and a big test of where I was in my mental toughness. Off of that, I think my greatest moment was probably in 2017. I won the Black Barn Junior Amateur Grand Prix that was at Hits Saugerties. It was a really special horse of mine that was supposed to be kind of my into the bigger tracks, not really, the one I went and won big classes on, and, maybe some little wins here and there. But it was, came out, it was 3 rounds, came out, had a clear round the first day, was one of 2 to jump clear in the second round the second day, and ended up being the only triple clear round through the week. And I think you could tie in my hard moment and my greatest moment with team and teamwork. The team at the gate with me, the team behind the scenes, my family, the team at home, having people there that support you and believe in you on the greatest days and on your lowest days. I was fortunate to be actually with the same group of people for both of those moments, and in the hard moment they really uplifted me, and in the good moment and the great moment, everyone was there to cheer me on, and then also like, hey, like, this was a great day, but we have to show again tomorrow. Yeah. So like bringing me back down to reality, and in the tough moment bringing me up to reality. So definitely the team behind you, I think, in the greatest moments and the hardest moments is super important, and something that I learned and have carried on to, who I am today, for sure.
That's awesome.
So what was the greatest moment of your career, the hardest moment, and what did you learn from each of them?
I'll start with the hardest as well. I would say in 2024, kind of in the spring, summer, I had just gotten a new horse. I had 2 of my own horses at the time and then added this new one. And one of my horses that I previously owned got injured right after I bought her. And then a couple weeks later, we went to Spruce. she got hurt on the first day. So now I'm down to one horse. And to be honest, it was a bit of a struggle during WEF. I didn't have my best season with her. And, you know, to be honest, after that horse got hurt, to be completely transparent, I went back to the hotel that night and I sobbed. I was so upset. But I learned, honestly, a lot from that and had actually a really good moment at the end of that week. And just kind of learned, you know, you got to focus on the good parts. There are going to be a lot of bad days and a lot of good days in horses. And I think when you really focus on the good parts, you know, like I'm at Spruce Meadows, like things aren't really that bad. So I think just perseverance that way. I learned a lot about that. And then I would say one of the greatest moments of my career was winning the National Grand Prix in Traverse City in the summer of 2023 with my very special mare. She basically has taken me from meter up into that point. So it was only my third National Grand Prix I had ever jumped. So I went in with like basically no expectations and kind of just went for it, and it really worked in my favor. So I think that really just taught me too, you know, sometimes you just have to let go and like trust yourself that, you know, you're there, you know, your team behind you wouldn't put you in this situation if you weren't capable of winning it. So I think I can just, if I can go out and give it a shot like that, I just learned a lot to trust myself and to make it simple. It's still something that I work on every day, making something very simple. It's very easy to make things complex in this sport. So I think simplicity and just really focusing on the good parts.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for tuning in to this week's NGP Trials and Tribulations series.